Um, Revelation, it's described as the Gentiles tread down the holy city for 40 and 2 months. Another example would be Revelation 12:6. God feeds his church in the wilderness for 1,203 days. These are all the same period. That 1,260 days matches one half of Christ's ministry there. The other half is also 3.5 years. And if you add 1,260 and 1,260, it comes to 2520 days of Christ's ministry. So if we go to Daniel, the book of Daniel in chapter 9, you know, where Daniel is praying, and he's praying for the sins of the Jews, the Hebrews, and the fact that they've forsaken the covenant with God and the sins of his people. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll just go from 9:6. Everybody there, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Chapter 9, verse 6.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, it says, neither have we hearkened unto thy servants the prophets, spake in thy name to our kings, our princes, our fathers, and all the people. So I only pointed this one out because there's an order there of, I think, blame for, because the kings sort of influence the princes, the fathers, and the fathers, the people. There always seems to be a problem with the leaders. Anyway, 9:7, O Lord, our righteousness belongeth unto thee, but unto us confusion of faces, as at this day. To the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and unto all Israel that are near and that are far off, through all the countries whither thou hast driven them. So this is a scattering of God's people, which happened, Daniel was part of it, wasn't he, when he got taken to Babylon. And of course, this prayer comes with an understanding of, he mentions just previous to this that he'd been studying the book of Jeremiah, where Jeremiah prophesied that it would be 70 years that they would be in captivity. And the 70 years was just, if you look at the chronology, was a couple of years from being fulfilled. So Daniel starts to petition God for mercy. 9:11, it says, yea, all Israel have transgressed thy law, even by departing, that they might not obey thy voice. Therefore the curse, keep that word in mind, is poured upon us, and the oath that is written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, because we have sinned against him. So you can see that Daniel recognizes that the reason why they've been driven and scattered throughout the Babylonian Empire, well, actually it started with the Assyrian Empire, but it was still Babylon they got carried to. It was because of the curse and the oath written in the law of Moses. So if we now go to the law of Moses and go to Leviticus 26, and we start in verse 1. You there?
Yep.
Okay. It says, ye shall make you no idols, nor graven image, neither rear you up a standing image, neither shall you set up any image of stone in your land to bow down to, for I am the Lord your God. You shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am the Lord. If you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments and do them, and then there's a big list of blessings that follow this. But I pulled up this first because it's interesting that the first thing that is mentioned here is idolatry, which is another thing to keep in mind. And also the Sabbaths and the sanctuary as well, because this becomes relevant to the Advent movement. If you think about when the Adventists were raised up, they had given up the Trinity, which Ellen White states as being idolatry. When you have a wrong concept of God. I don't know if you're familiar with the quote. You might have used it in defense of, when you're trying to talk to your church members who are Trinitarian. Are you familiar with the one where she says, if you have a wrong concept of God as revealed in his word, you are practicing idolatry just as much as the Israelites were worshipping idols of stone and gold. And yeah, it's like, because idolatry starts in the mind. So if you're imagining God to be one in three and he's not, you're actually worshipping the wrong gods. It's a form of idolatry. So when the Adventists came out from Babylon during the Reformation, they gave up the Trinity and they discovered the sanctuary and the Sabbath and put the commandments back in their place. So I just thought that was interesting from Leviticus. If you drop down to verse 18, it says here, the blessings are talked of, but then the curses come. If you will not, he says, if you will not yet for all this hearken unto me, then I will punish you 7 times more for your sins. This is in the part of the curses. Okay, so 7 times. And I will break the pride of your power, and I will make your heaven as iron and your earth as brass. So this iron and brass is another note to make, because I don't know whether you've ever seen, I often wondered what it meant. It used to annoy me for years, but I couldn't figure out what the band of iron and brass were for. You know, in Daniel, when the tree is hewn down, Nebuchadnezzar is, he goes a bit mad. You know, he has a dream, and the dream is he sees this huge tree, and Daniel says the tree is you, and everybody's under the protection of Nebuchadnezzar, and then an angel comes down, says chop down the tree, but leave the stump and put a band of iron and brass around it. This is connected to that. So so in 18 we have 7 times the punishment. If you go to 26:21, he says again, if you walk contrary unto me and will not hearken unto me, I will bring 7 times more plagues upon you according to your sins. And then again in 26:24, then will I also walk contrary unto you and will punish you yet 7 times for your sins. And the last one is in verse 28, then I will walk contrary unto you also in fury, and even I will chastise you 7 times for your sins. So I'm sure we're all aware that when God repeats something, it's quite important, and we have 4 repetitions here. Now, there is arguments over the 7 times. It means a different, because people say this is not talking about prophecy, but Daniel actually mentions that the reason why they were scattered was because he points to this in the curse given in the law of Moses. So, like I say, at the end, after we've seen the prophecy, we can maybe run through the objections and the counter objections to why this is, whether it's what's the word, or valid or not. Okay, so let me go back now to the. Okay, if we look at the chart. In the year 742 on here. Now I've checked all these dates out. I've downloaded the annals of.
Sorry.
It's okay. Okay, Usher's Annals of the World, and there's some other books like by Prideaux. They're all like ancient historians. Well, at least at around like the 1700s and maybe earlier. James Anderson with the, let's see what that one's called, Royal Genealogies. These are all books that have dates and going off the chronology of the Bible, you know, it might say like in the 4th year of Hezekiah and things like that. And this is what started getting me into it, because I was doing a chart, a Visio chart for the 2300 days, and I started looking at chronology books and trying to just fill in some blanks, because normally when I look at charts, I think to myself, oh, that's nice, but there's never enough information to sort of give proof of the dates. And it led me into this. Yeah. So in the first one, in 742, let me get my notes. Okay. Isaiah gave a prophecy. And it's
In Isaiah chapter 7, verse 4.
Yes, it's 7, and it's verses 5 to 8.
Isaiah 7:42. Just open it up. No, there's only 25 verses in Isaiah 7.
No, the date is 742.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I looked you there.
It's no, I've got too many windows open. I'm losing all my. Yeah, 742 is the year. Sorry, that's 742 BC. The actual verse is Isaiah 7 verses 5 to 8. It says, because Syria, Ephraim, and the son of Remaliah have taken evil counsel against thee, saying, let us go up against Judah and vex it, and let us make a breach therein for us, and set a king in the midst of it, even the son of Tabeel. Thus saith the Lord God, it shall not stand, neither shall it come to pass. For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin, and within 65 years shall Ephraim be broken, that it be not a people. Okay, the background of this is the king of the northern tribes, which is what's the king's name? It's not Remaliah, is it? Okay, Rezin was the king of Syria, and the king of Israel like aligned with him basically to attack Judah. Now this is strange, because they're supposed, like, even though they had the differences, the north and the south, they're supposed to be of the one family, you know, they're still all Israelites. So this was a civil war. And this is another thing that's is something to make a note about. When Isaiah gave the prophecy, it was during a civil war between the north and the south. This becomes relevant at the end, because the opposite end of this prophecy, you know, does anybody know what a chiasm is?
Yes.
Okay, chiasm is when you have like a mirror image in the Bible. Like parts of the book of Revelation are written in chiasms. Like everything is set in a position like a pyramid, and they match up on each side. Well, at the end of this, if we go to the, if you shoot forward to the end of the prophecy and look where it finishes, the one that starts in 723. If you follow the bottom red thick arrow, it finishes in 1798. This was the northern kingdom. The southern kingdom, their scattering started in, hang on, let's go back, in 677 BC, and that one finishes in 1844. Now, if you look at the small underneath, you have the 46, the 65, and the 19. All of the dates match up. So Isaiah gives his prophecy. 19 years later, the prophecy is full, because he says within 65 years, Ephraim shall fall. So within that 65 years, you have the northern kingdom was attacked by Sennacherib and then his son. And in 723, there was a siege began, so they lost their freedom. That was after 19 years. Then 46 years later, in 677, the same power, the Assyrians, whilst they were on their way back to Samaria to take more prisoners and to give them a bit more, I don't know, I suppose you just call it grief. But they also attacked Judah and took Manasseh captive. So at the opposite ends of exactly the same amount of years come between 1798, 1844, and then 1863. Now, this is part of the argument as to why this isn't a valid prophecy, because part of it goes past 1844, and there was no prophetic time after 1844. But this part isn't actually prophetic time, because if you look at the definition of prophetic time, it's a day for a year principle. But these are there is no day for a year here. This was just a prophecy given by Isaiah, and it was 19 literal years before anything started to happen. And then 19 years after the end of the prophetic time in 1844, and the beginning of the prophetic time started in 723, you actually see that there was a civil war between the north and the south. Again, it's part of the mirror image, and we look at why that becomes important later. Okay, so this 2520 starts in 723, finishes in 1798. Okay. If we look at half of the 2520 and look at the red dotted line, it actually falls right on the year 538, which is when the 1260-day prophecy starts. So can you see, remember we said before, there was two periods where Christ's ministry, he had his spiritual ministry and he had his temporal. Well, the same things happens with paganism. We had the civil, or what was the definition again for temporal? Secular. That's the word. Secular or civil, 1260 or 3.5 prophetic years. And then there was the death of Christ, and then we had the spiritual 1260 days. Well, we have the same thing with paganism. We have a civil power for 3.5 years, and then we have a spiritual power for 3.5 years. Mm-hmm. Now, because the kingdoms were like when Moses gave the curse, he gave it to all of the Hebrews. That was like around the time of Sinai. So when the kingdom splits in two, the northern kingdom received their scattering first, but it was still pronounced on all of them. And it was Manasseh who was one of the, I think up to that time, I think the Bible describes Manasseh as he even did worse than the heathen when it came to worship, idol worship. He took the blasphemies and all of the things associated with heathen worship. He was worse than any heathen, the Bible says. And he brought all of this upon Judah. But one of the things was Manasseh, he repented. Are you familiar with the story of Manasseh? He repents. And actually, he was taken captive to Babylon in chains, but he didn't stay there long. He saw that, he saw the error of his ways, realized that God had punished him, and he repented, and God gave him his kingdom back. But it still left the Jews as they weren't a free nation anymore. They were under the power of paganism now. Paganism was like ruling over them. Okay, so if we all just go back to my notes, if you bear with me. Okay, so back in Daniel. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar, it's interesting that he says, the iron and brass round the stump, it says, in the tender grass of the field, sorry, I'm in 4:15, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed from a man's, and let a beast's heart be given to him, and let 7 times pass over him. So we have the link again with 7 times. Nebuchadnezzar he becomes a beast for 7 years, and it's interesting that a beast's heart. It says further down. In Daniel 4:25, it says that they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make thee to eat grass as an oxen, and they shall wet thee with the dew of heaven 7 times. Now, there's many places in the Bible. I haven't put them down, but you can look it up. I remember doing a sermon once on it, how the Bible uses foliage, it uses trees, grass, and the herb of the field to describe people. You know what I mean? You don't become a wolf in sheep's clothing by accident.
It's got to be by design.
It's like, you have to get the sheep and you have to take its thing and you have to actually put it on and pretend to be a sheep. So when you start to look at the leaders and this whole Trinity thing started opening my eyes, and especially when you look at the 1919 Bible Conference and all of the things that Ellen White said in her day about those who were in charge and the reason why they sent it to Australia, it doesn't surprise me that they're trying to suppress this, because I don't think they're real Adventists. They pay lip service to some of the prophecies that, that they can't really eradicate. It's like with this one, they can sort of twist some of Ellen White's writings and some of the pioneer stuff to say, well, it's not valid. And because it actually pinpoints the Advent movement as being the movement that God raised up to counteract what the papacy have been teaching. And it adds witnesses to all of the dates. Like you have, where it says, what is it? 2 or 3 witnesses, let something be established. It's like, as soon as you start pulling these prophecies out of the way, you start removing pillars that actually bolster all of the other beliefs.
Yeah. Do you remember Des Ford? Audrey and Emily, do you know about Des Ford?
Pardon?
Have you heard of Des Ford?
No.
I was just thinking about the same person, Josephine.
Desmond, yeah.
Okay,
Desmond.
well, let me just give you. I'm sorry to interrupt the narrative on the
go.
I'm sure. But Des Ford was someone who, in the 1980s, he was a professor in our Adventist college, Avondale College in Australia. Now, I believe that he was a Jesuit who was set up into that position, and eventually he went to America and did his damage there in order to destroy the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now, each Jesuit that gets put in the church seems to be given a particular job of what they're supposed to do. And what I can gather that he was supposed to do, and what he did do, was he attacked the message of the sanctuary. So what Des Ford taught was that there is no literal sanctuary in heaven or temple in heaven. Now, if you think that the 2,300-year prophecy is the one that's to do with the sanctuary, this 2520, just looking at this chart as I'm looking at it, it's all corroborating basically that 2,300-year prophecy, because it's showing the symmetry of these lots of 3.5 years. And well, I mean, I haven't really gone into it yet, but I can see that there's a lot of extra information that means that you can't get away from that 2,300-year prophecy, because there's loads of other prophecies that kind of are a foundation that make it definite that, yes, all these dates are correct. And what he was trying to do was get rid of that prophecy. And in order to get rid of that, this is just my hypothesis, they also wanted to suppress 2520, because that 2520 just is, like someone just said, another witness for the same set of dates. Does that make sense, what I just said?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The funny thing is that that movement is rising again. Obviously, it did its damage back then, and it's been in the church, but there's a lot more people speaking about Christ went straight into the most holy place after his ascension. So that is getting stronger in Adventism again. There's leading figures teaching that now, and a lot of people following them. So
Really?
It's interesting that's rising up the same time as the truth about God and all these things. They're rising as well. So generally there is a counter to that, isn't there? They try to destroy the truth. But Desmond Ford, for example, like, was he kicked out of the church? He was allowed to do his damage, yeah?
Yeah, he was.
And yet the people speaking truth, get out.
Yeah, that's true. The ones who had the truth, they would like, there was Emil Andreasen, for example, who was that's the one before that. I'm getting myself confused here. But yeah, it was very politically incorrect to stand up against him. My mum was in Australia for 2 years when she was about age 20 to 22, and she was in the college when Des Ford was a teacher there. And so, of course, in the 1980s, we sometimes used to discuss this as a family. And my mum always just said, oh, but he was such a nice chap. He was such a good Christian chap. And he knew his Ellen White backwards. He was very well educated, very intelligent, very charming, a perfect person to do the job that he did. And my mum cannot be convinced that he was anything other than what he looked like, a really nice, good person, because he was so charming and so kind to everybody. But the Bible says that even Satan masquerades as an angel of light.
Yeah, and the thing is, Des Ford didn't deny the date 1844 because he recognized that you couldn't get away from the 2,300 days. But what he said was that nothing happened in 1844.
Right.
Okay, it's like there was no movement in the sanctuary. There's no investigative judgment. But when you start to look at this, and we've got to remember, when Des Ford was out, the 2520 was already sort of suppressed. It's something that came up a lot later, and I think that's why they've tried to jump all over it, because what Desmond Ford was teaching and came out and said publicly, all of our scholars believe what Desmond Ford believed. That's why he was never disfellowshipped.
Well, no, not all of them, because on my YouTube site, which is Truth for Freedom 7, when I was finding out about this about 7 years ago, I found that there were the two brothers who, what were they called? Standish brothers, yeah. And they do different sermons which went into the history of the whole Des Ford business, because they were in Australia at the time when it happened, and it happened to them, so it was a first person account. And I uploaded lots and lots of videos about that onto my YouTube site, which are still there. You can see them. And they were basically telling the story of what Des Ford did. So I know that there were some people who stood against him. Like,
oh yeah, so yeah, I'm not saying like, yeah, when I said like all of the scholars, but when you look at the scholars who were in the positions of teachers, like for example, you know when they had the 1919 Bible conference.
No, I don't know anything about that. Can you tell us?
Yeah, okay. In short, what happened was when Ellen White died, or before Ellen White died, she was basically exposing Kellogg. A.T. Jones had sided with Kellogg. Wagner went off and married another lady and left his wife, and he fell away. There was all sorts of things coming into the church. We had, it was the guy who changed the meaning of the daily, which even Willie White started to come around to the idea that it might be right. There was all sorts of heresies coming into the church, and she was trying to speak against them. They got fed up with her, sent her to Australia, and then when she died, they wanted to have this meeting where they could discuss how they were going to go forward with our doctrines, because a lot of our books that were being printed, like for example, Uriah Smith's Daniel and Revelation was basically a non-Trinitarian book. It had all sorts of what they called heresies in. Now, I don't know whether you know, but in the 1940s, they completely rewrote Uriah Smith's book. In fact, one pastor, and he's right, because I actually tried going through the old version and the new version to pick out the bits they changed, but it's just been chopped up and rearranged so much that it's dishonest to even put Uriah Smith's name on the cover anymore, because although a lot of his prophecies were left in there, and his work like on history and stuff, they took so much out about the nature of God and Jesus. And during the 1919 Bible Conference, these are one of the things they spoke about. They tried to change the books while Ellen White was alive, and there's loads and loads of statements where she says, leave the books alone. You're trying to pull pins out and change things, and God hasn't. In fact, she said that Prescott, who was I think he was the vice president, and he was one of the leading members of the education system, and Daniels, who was the president at the time, she said that both them men were being guided by fallen angels. And these are the leaders of the church, She said that they need to be reconverted. They were dishonest. No wonder they sent her to Australia. But so they wanted to, as soon as she died, they wanted to have this meeting, and it was only because of the war that it delayed everything, because they couldn't get everybody to come from around the world because of the First World War. But as soon as the First World War finished, they had the meeting in 1919. And the minutes are online. There's about 1,000 and odd pages, but you can go through and do some word searches, and you'll see that the things they were trying to say, Ellen White was no historian, that you can't take things that she said as truth. Things in the Great Controversy, that was when they first started to call our pioneers Aryan or semi-Aryan, and Prescott was trying to say, well, we shouldn't use the word begotten, we should use the word co-equal and co-eternal. They were trying to bring all of these things in, and what happened was a few men stood up. Daniels thought that it was just all going to go to his plan and that everyone would accept what they were saying, but there was resistance, and there was so much resistance in the meeting that the minutes of the meeting were taken and they were buried in a vault for 50 years. Now, on that chart, David, that you put up, the conspiracy triangle, if you notice on one of them levels, it says 1919. I think that the blurb at the side is, we have questions. Yeah. That's because that's the truth. It was the Spectrum magazine that in fact, nobody knew anything about the 1919 Bible Conference until a couple of men went down into the vaults, and wrapped in newspaper, they found all of the minutes to the meeting, and they started to publish parts of the minutes. And it turns out that, I think some of the scholars today, they try to deny that it was a secret meeting, but Daniels himself uses the words that the people are very nervous about what we're doing in secrecy. He actually uses the word secret, and they're trying to say it wasn't a secret meeting. It was invitation only, and only the highest individuals in the church, like conference leaders, division leaders, or educators in all the universities, were invited. So you couldn't just go there. And actually, it seems like it's a fulfillment of what happens in Ezekiel 8 and 9. I don't know whether you're familiar with them chapters, where it says that they turn their backs towards the sun and worship the temple towards the east. If you look at the build-up to that in chapter 8, the leaders in Israel bring in idols secretly into the church. They create another door. You've got the sanctuary door, and he tells Ezekiel to dig and have a look, and he sees another door is being made, another Christ, if you like, because Christ is the door. So instead of having the begotten Son, you have this other door. And when he looks into the sanctuary, you see all the leaders burning incense to idols. It's a scary thing, because that happens in the Adventist church. And Ellen White said at the time, Ezekiel 9 will literally happen in the future.
She says that, does she?
Yeah, she does. She says, study Ezekiel chapter 9, because these things will happen in the future. Now, 8 and 9, you can't just take 9 on its own, because the actual vision starts in chapter 8. So when you study it all, it's a fulfillment of what happened. It's bizarre.
I'd like to do that one week, because I know Mark has spoken about Ezekiel 9 a number of times, and I've not really looked at it myself. So that'd be an interesting one to do at some point.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Sorry to interrupt, boys, but I've got to drop off. My grandson's just turned up, and he's actually here a little bit too early. He's supposed to come in on this afternoon. No worries. But he's there he is. He's just always over there.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. So
Okay,
I'm going to drop off at a minute. All right. I'll be there next week though, if you're on next
okay,
week.
mate,
So,
that's cool.
Good to see you.
have a good day, guys.
No worries.
See
All
you
right,
later.
Phil. See you in a bit.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so if we get back to the chart, then, right, where was I up to? We were in Daniel, weren't we? Yeah, with the hewing down of the tree. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar becomes a beast, yeah, that eats the grass, and the grass, multiple places in the Bible you will see are people. And a lot of the time God refers to his people as grass, and he refers to them as like trees and willows and herbs of the field. So here's a beast devouring people symbolically, right? Now, if we
Say
go
that
to
again. Let me get my head around that. You've got a beast devouring people. Say that again.
yeah, like, okay, if you
again with the
if you look in the Bible, there are lots of places where you will see like that people are referred to as trees. Yeah, like it will say like about a king, he thought he was a mighty cedar, but I will hew him down. And you know, like the pride of some of the people who were mighty and proud were referred to as like the cedars of Lebanon. You have the people referred to as grass. They shall wither like the grass, and all of these different things. So it's like a common symbol for people to be linked to grass and herbs of the field and trees. And it's just interesting that Nebuchadnezzar, it said, I mean, he was Babylon, wasn't he? It says he was given a beast's heart, and he was made to eat the grass.
So what you're saying is that Babylon was eating people. In other words, Babylon was destroying people.
Destroying God's people, yeah, because I mean, that's why Daniel was given if you think about in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, he saw an idol because he was an idolater, and that impressed his mind. But when Daniel was given the same vision, he was given the vision as beasts, because these beasts were always devouring God's people.
Right.
There's a bit of a link there. So if we also go to let me get we go to Daniel. Okay, Belshazzar, so it's the next chapter, the handwriting on the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, now, because I've not presented this before, I don't know which way round to put it. I might wait, but the first 5 chapters of Daniel actually tell the story of the 3 angels' messages.
Really?
So we'll look at that in a minute because it sort of links in with what we're talking about.
The Bible is an incredible book, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah, it's just amazing. Okay, so Belshazzar, in this 5th chapter, he has the party, if you like. And he asks, in verse 2, it says, he commands to bring the golden and silver vessels which Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes and wives and his concubines might drink therein. So Belshazzar fills the vessels with the wine of Babylon. Now that's an interesting thing in itself, right? Let me just have a... I'm going to try and find something for you here a minute. Because I have to find... Caleb, can you just bring my phone from over there, please, son? If you don't mind. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, so he brings the vessels out of the temple, and he brings them in, and he says, "Thank you, son." He drinks out of them and honors the gods of silver, brass, iron, wood, and stone. Now, his father, well, it was his grandfather, but he must have known what happened to his grandfather. Nebuchadnezzar went mad, if you like. He went out for 7 years, 7 times into the field. But Nebuchadnezzar repented. Even though Nebuchadnezzar was proud, he allowed God to teach him who was really in control, and his pride was humbled. In fact, a lot of people say Nebuchadnezzar, going by the fact that he wrote that chapter, it looks like he will be in heaven.
Yeah.
Whereas his grandson, he had the same sort of pride, but he didn't understand what was going on. Now, if we look at the writing on the wall, and which
Daniel 7, no, 5:25.
5:25. Thank you, Susan.
Afternoon.
Okay. Now this writing that came up, Mene Mene Tekel Upharsin. This is really interesting. Okay, a Mene. These are Arabic words or Hebrew words. So we're going to look at what they mean. Okay. So tekel or mene, sorry. Okay, it means numbered. But if you look, right, Strong's gives it the word numbered, but if you go to the Thayer version, the Thayer version is very good because it gives a lot of, tells you what words mean.
What's the Thayer version? I've never heard of that.
Thayer, I'll show you. I'll just get my Bible up with it in. Let me just go to Daniel 5. Okay, mene. Okay, it's a weight or a measurement. And that's why it says, thou art weighed in the balances. That's why Daniel said that. But the weight was actually 50 shekels. Yeah. So if you have a Thayer dictionary, it's good because it always gives you a little bit more on what the word means. It's like the Thayer dictionary, it's a Bible dictionary, I suppose. Thayer gives you a lot of, like, it will tell you what the names of people mean.
How do you spell Thayer?
Thayer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's very good for, when you get genealogies. Like, for example, have you ever seen in Genesis where all of the names of the people of the sons of God in like, I think it's from Seth, as you go down, if you put them all in a line, it makes a sentence, and it basically, the meanings of all the names in the genealogy is a mini description of the gospel. Has anybody ever seen that? No.
Yeah, I've seen that. It's good.
Yeah, so the Thayer dictionary can help you with things like that because it tells you what each individual name actually means in the Hebrew. But with this one, it tells us that a mina or a mene was actually, it was a weight, but it was 50 shekels. And when you look at this 525, there's no real need for the writing, like mene doesn't have to be repeated. It's like, it's mene. It's like, why has God repeated mene? Well, we'll see. I'm sure you're aware now where I'm going with this, but we'll see when we add up the values for what these are. Okay, so we have mene, which is 50 shekels.
How do you say the meaning again?
The meaning, it's a measurement.
Measurement.
Yeah. To be a weight. So
Okay.
to be weighed, you have been weighed. Okay. So 50 shekels, and a mene is another 50 shekels. And then a tekel, okay, is the unit of a shekel. So that was, hang on, if I, you'll have to forgive me because I've not, in my presentation this week, I didn't actually get this far with mapping everything else, so I'm sort of flying by the seat of my pants a bit here.
Don't worry, this is extremely interesting.
Let me- Here we go. Okay, a tekel is 1 unit. Yeah. It's the Babylonian term for a shekel. That's what tekel means. So we have 50 shekels, 50 shekels, and 1 shekel. And the Perez, or a Upharsin, which actually, if we go to the concordance again, okay, it's half a mina or half a mene, which means to divide in half. So that's why Daniel said, you have been weighed, which is the weight of the first one, the mene, which was 50, the measurement of 50 shekels. You've been weighed in the balance, yeah, and found wanting. Because he understood when he added these up and realized what the weights were, he must have understood, because of his prayer, the curse of Moses. Because as soon as he realized this added up to 2520, it must have freaked him out. But okay, so 50 shekels mene, 50 shekels another mene. A tekel is 1 shekel, and a perez is half of a mene, so 25. So that's 126 shekels. Now, if we go to Leviticus 27, and verse.
We have a hand up, David. We have a hand up.
Oh, sorry.
I'm ever so sorry to stop you
It's
mid-flow.
okay.
Yeah, just stop him.
How do you get 25-20 out of 50-51 and a half?
I'm just going to show you now. That's why we're going to. That's why
Right.
we're going to Leviticus.
You got 126 times 10, is that it?
27,
Oh, 100.
25. Right. Okay. Hang on a minute. Okay. And all thy estimations shall be according to the shekel of the sanctuary. 20 gerahs shall be the shekel. A shekel is worth 20 gerahs. Okay.
What verse are you in,
So-
Leviticus?
Leviticus 27, 25.
Right.
So when you look at the word for gerah, yeah, it's a small weight, a coin. So a shekel is 20 gerahs. These are the weights that God gave them. Now, are you taking notes?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Jeng's saying go easy. They might be taking notes, but it's here who's actually want me to go easy.
Josephine, she keeps writing and going so fast.
Oh, hello, Eileen.
Oh,
Didn't
I'm
notice.
writing it down as well. No, this is like gold dust. You don't hear this every day.
Yeah. So
I've never heard it before in my life.
I've never heard.
So if you now take that 126 shekels and you times it by the 20 gerahs that it's worth,
Oh, I see.
so times
it comes to 225.20 gerahs.
Let me just look at that. So you've got 50 and 50, that's 100. And you've
Yeah.
got half of that, which is 25, so that's 125.
Oh, isn't it?
And one tekel
And one. So you've
is,
got
yeah,
126.
like, yeah,
126 times 20 comes, what you say, to 25.20.
25.20, yeah.
So what Daniel did was he worked out the number of shekels in Babylonian shekels, multiplied it by the shekels of the temple, and came to 25.20, and then freaked out.
Yeah, and then, because if you now go to, let me just get them off.
Oh, wow.
Okay, thy kingdom is divided between the Medes and the Persians. Okay, in that night, Belshazzar, the kingdom of the Chaldeans, was slain.
You're reading from Daniel 5:30.
Yeah, I'm back in Daniel. Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 2 years old. So this 25.20, I just stopped there actually. There's a little bit more. Because if you go back to the book of Numbers now, if I can just find where it is.
Sorry, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I'm very disruptive. I'm sorry. Tell me to be quiet if you want, and I won't.
No.
But you mentioned something about, and the kingdom is going to be divided. Is that only because the Peres meant to divide in half, which gives us the 25, or was there some other significance you were getting from that sentence?
Well, it was divided in the sense that the people that conquered them were the Medes and the Persians, so it was divided between the Medes and the Persians.
Oh, right.
So it does have a double meaning, if you like.
Thank you.
784 to 86. So, okay, if you go to Numbers 7. We see, right? Do you remember the vessels now that Belshazzar was using?
In the party.
Yeah.
So Numbers chapter 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have,
Verses.
yeah, it says here, this was the dedication of the altar in the day. Sorry, I mean,
the verse.
Numbers 784. Okay, this was the dedication of the altar in the day when it was anointed by the princes of Israel. 12 charges of silver, 12 silver bowls, 12 spoons of gold. Okay? So we have plates, spoons, and a, oh, it's snowing. Plate, spoons, and cups for the party, which Belshazzar was using them for. So each charger of silver weighed 130 shekels. Each bowl 70, and the silver vessels weighed 2,400 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary. The golden spoons were 12, weighing 10 shekels apiece after the shekel of the sanctuary. All the gold of the spoons was 120 shekels. Okay, so
Do we have to do some computation?
we have to do a little bit of maths again, yeah. So the charges in the bowls were 2,400 shekels. It's okay. We can always go back and look at this, and
Okay.
you know, as long as you've got the numbers written down. Sorry, I'm getting coached.
You're going too fast.
Taxi driver. The
Yeah,
charges in the bowls got 2,400
400
shekels.
shekels.
So
and the
you're
spoon.
multiplying them all by 20 because of the Gira thing.
No, this is just shekels at the moment. Okay,
2,400 shekels for the charges in the bowls.
bowls, and the spoons 120 shekels. If you add that up, that's 2520 shekels. So before we had 2520 geras, which was the coin of the sanctuary, and now all of the bowl, all the cutleries and the cups and what have you weigh 2520 shekels. So I think when they say that there's nothing in this, and that, you know, there's this 2520 thing's a load of nonsense and you need to be disfellowshipped. To me, I'm just like, how, I don't know how you can like look at this and think that this isn't relevant. I don't know. I don't. Now,
I would say
scholars now are like, the investigative judgment is like, okay, 1844 is a date, but I think Adrian Evans said in one of his sermons, he said when he was in seminary, his teacher said to him, nothing happened in 1844. Were you there? You know, he was teaching the pastors, and this is what they're all like. So I can understand why they don't like this prophecy, because it exposes them. That's what I think anyway. And it shows that the church has been, you know, like, well, if the church is wrong about this doctrine and it's wrong about that doctrine and they've disregarded that doctrine, well, maybe the pioneers were right about the Trinity. And do you know what I mean? It all sort of, it all knocks onto each other. It's a bit like doing a bit of if you do an investigation and you've got evidence and you've got like a few pieces of evidence and you go into court, then, I mean, imagine the court, you're trying to figure things out in your mind. A few pieces of evidence, you can sort of say, oh, well, but if there's overwhelming amounts of evidence stacked up with all of these, I mean, surely this cannot be just some random thing that people, I mean, the amount of 2520s we just found, and the amount of 7 times that's in Daniel and the curse and Daniel's prayer, and everything connected.
Can I ask you a question? How do you get 2520 from 7 times? Is that 7 times 360?
Yes.
Right.
Jesus' ministry.
Sorry.
Say again, sorry, Susan.
Jesus' ministry, 3.5 years, that's 1,260 days, is that correct?
Yes. So were you at the beginning? Because that's what we started off with Jesus' ministry. If you look at his ministry,
Yes.
the last week in Daniel, you've got the second half of his ministry to the Jews
Yes.
was a spiritual ministry. He was in heaven. He was the high priest by then.
Right.
The first half of his ministry was a temporal ministry. I think I looked at the meaning of temporal. Okay, so temporal is the opposite to spiritual, but temporal can also mean secular or civil or
Right.
relating to earthly life. So you've got two 1,260 days for Jesus' ministry, half spiritual and half temporal or secular, if you like, pertaining to this world. Paganism was the same. They had a ministry of 1,260 days from when it started up to 538, which was paganism. And then paganism then became the papacy, and they now have a spiritual. So it's like, I think this is why the beast in Daniel was diverse from the others, wasn't he? Because he changed from being a secular power to a religious power. And the Pope actually is like the high priest, if you like. He stands in the place of Christ. He's anti-Christ. So all of this all meshes in with each other.
Can I ask a question?
What?
Sorry. Oh, I'm just looking at your chart here, and there's two little bits that you haven't gone over, which maybe you'd like to comment on.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
It says Manasseh, Jehoiakim, Zedekiah, and then over here, which seems to be the parallel, is the 4 periods of progressive desolation in Adventism. Can you make any comments on those two little sections?
Yes, I've not really looked at that because, like I say, this isn't my chart. I know some people try to tie in. If you see there, they've got 1844 to 1888, which we would know as being up to the time where they rejected the righteousness by faith.
Yeah.
Then 1888. Now it's funny they put 1919, and that's we talked about the 1919 Bible Conference.
Yeah.
And then from there they got 1919 to 1989. I think that's when isn't that when we rejected the? Isn't that not Desmond Ford, what you were talking about? I'm not sure, to be honest.
Don't know what happened in 1989. It would have been around Des Ford, but a lot of things happened at that stage. The Trinity came in, in 1980? And then at some point they changed the logo from the 3 angels around a globe to what it is now. I think that was 1985.
Fine.
I don't know what happened in 1989.
Well, that's something we'll have to look into. I'll have to try and go to the people who, I know there's a website.
Yeah, we could Google this.
Yeah, they're called. I'll have to have a look for you, but I did go on the website. Like I say, I only got this for the chart, so I don't really.
Yeah. Very interesting. So if this 2520 was on both of those charts,
Yeah.
you see what I've heard in my dim and distant memory is that Ellen White said that on one of these charts, God placed his hand over it and there was a mistake on it and they didn't see it. Was this not that, or was it something else? Have you any idea what that was talking about?
Yes, that was the mistake that got, the mistake that God put his hand over was the fact that they thought it was 1843.
Ah.
When you read what she said about it, because on the next chart it was changed, but the second chart still had the 2520 on it.
Right, so the mistake wasn't the 2520 then?
No. The mistake was because the first chart is called the 1843 chart. I don't know if you know that.
The 1843 chart.
Yeah.
No.
So I've got the chart here somewhere. Let me have a.
You know, I feel so sad that because I missed the study, so I'll have to do some research or contact you, Dave. But years ago, a good friend of mine, I won't say, no, he's not a good friend of mine. He used to be a friend of my husband's. David Bartholomew I believe he was disfellowshipped. And
Okay.
my relatives told me to stay away from him because he's accepted this doctrine. And instead of having the desire to just study it out, I just took what they said and thought, man, poor David, why has he gone astray? And I just let that brother just go, and I feel really bad now that I'm open to something because I'm in a trusting environment. But if you had come a year ago with this, no, I wouldn't have. And I feel bad because as Adventists, we have to start I have to condition my mind now to first find out if something is truth, first research it, and then dismiss it.
Yeah.
But don't have an ugly attitude about it because it hurts people.
Mm.
And yeah, I just feel bad that I contributed to that.
Yeah.
Can you still get in touch with him?
I'm gonna try.
So was it this fellowship because of this 2520?
Yeah, I believe so. If what I had heard from it's actually my cousin who's very much against the father and the son doctrine, who told me about him. But I'll try and get in touch with him.
On this chart, it's got a preparation time of Antichrist in the middle between 508 and 538, Daniel 12:11. Can you comment on that at all, please?
Where's that? Sorry.
But in the middle of the chart, next to the red dotted line,
Oh yeah.
blue line with 30 written on it.
Oh yes, yeah.
One of Antichrist. I'm just looking up. Shall I just read you Daniel 12:11 so we know what it says?
Yeah, sure, go on.
And from the time that the daily sacrifice being a supplied word, and from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. And then it goes on, blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1,335 days. But go thou thy way till the end be, for thou shalt rest and stand in thy lot at the end of the days. So have you got anything you'd like to say about that?
All I know about that is them two dates, 508 and 538. In 508, Clovis, the King of France, became a Catholic. Now, up until this time, the Bishop of Rome they were having trouble with the, the Arians.
Yeah.
What they called Arians. There were three tribes: the Vandals, the Visigoths, and the Ostrogoths, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And they believed what Arius taught. Now, it's funny because Rome destroyed all of Arius's writings except for like one letter or something like that. Like there's a small piece that they kept, because in one of them he said that God created Christ. But if you read actually what they've said, what he said, he's talking about in the sense of being begotten. Because if you go to Proverbs chapter 8, when it says, I was, from the beginning, I was set up, and hang on, let me just get, I don't want to misquote it, let me go. Proverbs. Yeah. 22 or something like that, I think. Okay, yeah. In Proverbs 8:22, it says, the Lord possessed me in the beginning of his way, before his works of old, and then I was set up from everlasting. Now, these words, if you go to the concordance, okay, the word possessed, H7069, yeah, the word possessed, it says to erect, that is create by extension, okay? which in a sense, I feel sorry for Arius because he was just using the actual definition of what the term is in Hebrew. All the angels were created out of nothing. But Christ, if you like think about we have this example of Adam and Eve. Eve was created, but she wasn't created like the rest of the things from nothing. She was created from Adam's rib. So she was a part of Adam, if you like. But there was still some sort of, I mean, it's like if we have children, we sort of, you can use the term create in a way. You know, you make babies, if you want to say it like that. So although he used the word create, I don't think he meant in the way that the Catholic Church tried to make out today, because now all the historians say, oh yeah, Arius believed that Jesus wasn't divine. But when you read what he wrote, he did believe in the divinity of Christ. He used the term begotten a lot as well. So, but they focus on this one word. So you had these three tribes who were all living around Italy. I think the Vandals were just on the other side of the water in North Africa. And the Ostrogoths, I think, or the Visigoths were in northern Italy. And they were all believing in a begotten son. And Rome had trouble with them, and Rome had a problem. It wasn't until Clovis came along in 508 and became a Catholic that the papacy got an army. He became subject to the Pope, and it was Clovis that took out these tribes. You know, the Bible says that it plucked them up by the roots. Mm-hmm. Now, when you pluck a horn up, or you pluck one of these powers up by the roots, that depicts that there was not a trace left. You know, if you pull a plant up and you pull up its roots as well, it cannot be identified in any way. It's like, and that's what they did. They wiped out these. But what they did with these tribes was they destroyed all their artwork and all their literature. So nobody knows really what they believed, apart from what Rome tells us. Mm. In 538, once the last of these three tribes are gone, I think it was the Ostrogoths. I'll have to double check, but that's when Justinian, who was now the emperor in the east, in Constantinople, where Constantine had set up his headquarters, because they moved from, and this also is in prophecy when it says the place of his sanctuary shall be moved or something. I think that's also in Daniel. I'll have to find that. I'll have to look for that. Jonah, can you find that for me, Jim? Just search sanctuary in Daniel or Revelation. Okay. Yeah, so he moved his headquarters, if you like, over to Constantinople, and it was in 538 that Justinian issued a decree where Rome, under the authority of the emperor, the Pope, was allowed to become the corrector of heretics. And if you look in the Justinian decree, very interesting, anybody, it wasn't just about the Sabbath, it was anybody who spoke out against the Trinity, which is interesting enough. Not a lot of people know. No. Wow. And I've got a copy of that decree somewhere. Yeah, what I'll do is I'll try and prepare a bit more for next week, so we can, because like I say, we can go over the objections to this, because some people say, oh, Ellen White said it was done away with and there was a mistake on the chart, and other people say, well, the 7 times in Leviticus doesn't actually mean times, and they get into some like nitty-gritty of, but when you actually study it, they're wrong. And there's a few other objections. I think I mentioned one before, which is the one because part of the time period goes past 1844, but it's not prophetic time, so it doesn't count. Just like Isaiah's 19 years before the scattering began is not counted as prophetic time either. So that doesn't really stack up. So there's a few objections, you know, in case people hit you with these, at least you might have an answer.
When you're looking at the 1863 date, which mirrors the 742 BC date, in 1863, was it 1863 that we became officially Seventh-day Adventists, or was it?
Yes.
So is that what is the significance of that date then?
That's what people are saying, yeah. I mean, you don't really need the Isaiah date. It's just an interesting little fact that he gave a prophecy 19 years before that there was going to be a scattering, yeah?
Yes.
Because if you look at this whole thing, God's people are scattered from these two dates. And then when you go to the other end, God gathers his people again. So you have a scattering and a gathering, and it's just interesting that all of them, from the first prophecy of Isaiah, it fits in exactly 19 years after 1844, which was the official founding of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Yeah. And then you've got 30 times 2. You've got the 30 between the 508, and then you've got the 30 going back from 27 AD. So I know that there are 30 years, you can calculate, but what's the significance of having those two 30s?
Well, it just, you remember we said before the way that Satan always has, like if you think about Jesus' ministry, he received a mortal wound, and the papacy also received a mortal, or the Bible says seemed to receive a mortal wound, and Jesus was resurrected, and the papacy is going to resurrect again. So there's these parallels between Christ and Antichrist, and Jesus prepared for his ministry for 30 years. Well, from when he was born until he, and also the papacy from 508 to 538 prepared, because he didn't start his ministry, really, the papacy, until 538 officially. Do you know what I mean? Because that's when he became the corrector of heretics.
Well.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And then you've got anger, desolation, and scattering over here, and mercy, building, and gathering over here. What's the significance of those two little bits?
There's that. Yeah, I just think that's like what we said. They're the two opposite ends. I don't know why they've chosen them words, because I didn't do the chart, but I think they're just trying to draw the contrast between because God said he would be angry with them if they worshipped other gods, and that's when the idolatry started. But it was from like Manasseh, or not the idolatry started, but because of their idolatry, that's what happened. But like we were saying earlier, if we look at Daniel and go to if we look in verse 1, if we think about the three angels' messages, let me get the three angels' messages up in here. Revelation
14, isn't it?
6, 14:6 or something like that, yeah. Oh, 14:7, it says, fear God and give glory to him. Yeah?
Yes.
So in verse 1 of Daniel
chapter what?
Daniel chapter 1,
yeah.
they make a stand, don't they? And they glorify God by not accepting the food from the king's table, because it could be sacrificed to idols, and they glorify God in their bodies, if you like, in the way they don't bow to the king's request of eating food that's not ordained of God. So in chapter 2, okay, it's Babylon is for, like, Revelation Yeah, in the second angel's message, it says, Babylon is fallen, is fallen. Well, in the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon falls, doesn't it?
Yeah, in the end.
Yeah. Okay, and then if you go to the third chapter of Daniel, we'll see that it says, do not worship the beast and his image.
Yeah,
And
the image.
in Daniel, we have, remember, Nebuchadnezzar became a beast.
Mm.
We saw that before in the 7 times. And here he makes an image to the beast because he's it was an image of himself. Do you remember? So so we have the third angel's message here with the image of the beast, and then in Daniel chapter 4, if we go to Revelation 18, verses 2 to 4. Yeah. And he cried mightily with a strong voice. This is the fourth angel, if you like. He cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, has become the habitation of devils and the hold of every foul spirit and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich to the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. So, when we see this in this chapter of Daniel, he has a second dream, doesn't he, where he becomes fallen, if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he becomes the habitation of devils. He goes crazy.
Mm.
And this is where the curse of the 7 times comes in for him. Well, it's linked to the curse of the 7 times. Yeah, he actually, if you think about it, Nebuchadnezzar is driven. He comes out of Babylon in this. I don't know whether you can see the parallel. It's not as easy to see. But then if you go to verse 5. You got the final fall of Babylon. And this is what we see if we go back to when we look at what happened in Daniel chapter 5. This is Belshazzar, what we looked at before. I don't know if you were familiar with Revelation, where it says that the Euphrates was dried up.
Where's that, in chapter 19, or where's that?
Let me just.
My iPad's just about to stop working with the battery, so I'm going to nip through to Emily's room.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm just going Euphrates.
Where is it?
EUBHRA
Euphrates.
EES.
Yeah.
No, there's no I. EES.
No.
There's a.
Okay, yeah, got it. It's going to be in Revelation. Yeah, Revelation 16, 12.
12. Oh, yes.
In relation to Babylon. It's funny because it says, the 5th angel poured out his vial upon the seat of the beast, and the kingdom was full of darkness, and they gnawed their tongues for pain, and blasphemed the God of heaven, which is what Belshazzar did. Remember, we said before, he filled the vessels with the wine of Babylon, and of their pains and their sores, and he repented not, whereas his grandfather Nebuchadnezzar repented. And it says the 6th angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and that's how Cyrus conquered Babylon, he dried up, he diverted the river Euphrates that ran through Babylon and was able to march under the city. And the Bible calls Cyrus the anointed of God. He's a type of Christ. So this shows the end time. So, I mean, when you study it out and look at them first 5 chapters, it actually gives a sort of story of the 3 angels' message and the fall of Babylon.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yeah, sure.
If you could turn to Revelation chapter 18, where we just were, and look at verse 6. It's not what you were talking about, but as I looked at it, I thought you might be able to comment on it. Because we're looking at numbers. It says, reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works, in the cup which she hath filled to her double. So you see, because in your chart, you've got like the 1260, and then you've got 1260, and everything seems to be doubled up and mirrored. So is there anything that you can comment on about this verse, about the double according to her works? Is it, I just wondered if you had any light on that word double in there.
I've not really noticed that, to be honest, but I suppose it could have something to do with it. I'd have to look. Like I say, this is just a chart I've pulled up off the internet just for us to.
I mean, this might have nothing to do with the 2520, but do you anybody have got any idea what it means about double her? Does it mean that God is going to give her double the amount of trouble that she's given to other people? And why does God choose double? I don't know. I'm just waffling, but I think it's just a question that's come in my head, because just in case someone knows.
Sorry, I'm not too sure on that.
Not too sure.
Seems like the double reward is her plagues come in one day. She shall be utterly burned with fire. It's interesting, actually, looking at this after watching that. Has everybody watched that Judgment Hour video about Nashville?
Yes, I've watched it. You haven't?
No.
No.
You need to.
Yeah, it's you really need to watch that as soon as you get a chance. I don't know if anybody. What about you, Audrey and Emily? Have you watched that? No. It's a prophecy that, well, not a prophecy. It was a prophecy Ellen White gave, but she was given a vision about something that happens in Nashville in the future. And it was only in 2015 when some people from Australia hacked, because of this thing with the Trinity. There was a big load of, is it 50,000 documents or something that Ellen White had that they hadn't released.
They kept it.
And they kept from everybody. And a group tried to take them to court to get them to release? Because because they were supposed to be in the public domain, the documents. In fact, we know one of the, well, when I say we know him, we don't know him, he's just a friend on Facebook, but
You got in touch with him.
yeah, they were a group called SD Anonymous, so SDA Anonymous. And the guy who, now he changed his name to Valiant, didn't he? He's married to a girl from Armenia, but he's like he's really good with the computers. He's a programmer. So he hacked into the White Estate's website and stole some documents and said he was going to release them if they didn't, come clean. And there was a big court case in America. Anyway, they ended up, I think it was on the 100th birthday or something. They
celebration.
Yeah, they said, oh, well, because it's been 100